I'm really happy to host today's event, Streets That Scream, Politics on the Wall, featuring my friend and collaborator, DJLU, who's also known as Juega Siempre. Today's talk is co-sponsored by the Hansen Peace Chair and the Center for Latin American Studies at San Diego State University. I'd like to thank Rebecca Bartel and Ramona Perez for co-sponsoring. And I'd also like to thank all of my amazing students from Brazilian Studies 496, Anthropology 529, and Malis 600D for opening up our classroom to host DJLU. And a little bit about our speaker today. An architect and street artist since 2004, DJLU uses stencil and other techniques such as stickers, posters, muralism, publications, and stamps to intervene in the cityscape. His series, Street Pride, consists of large format, multi-layered stencils. His character portraits, based on photographs that he has taken himself, pay homage to the anonymous people who inhabit public spaces, challenging commercial stereotypes. He's participated in over 100 collective and 10 solo exhibitions in Colombia and abroad. His work has appeared in several documentaries, academic books, and articles, as well as art books on Latin American street art and stencil, including 2 books just about his work. He's part of the collective Bogotá Street Art, which has also published several books on their artistic interventions and just released a new beautiful book of their work called Válvulas de Escape, or Escape Valves, which was published last month by Valija de Fuego Press in Bogotá. Join me in welcoming DJLU.
Hello, Crystal. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thanks a lot, and thanks for that great introduction. Okay, thanks everybody for coming. I hope that you enjoy my speech. I hope I make myself clear also, because I don't speak English every day, so sometimes I just get a little bit lost, but I hope you are patient on me. Mainly, I am here to talk about street art, because I am a street artist. I've been working painting on the streets probably almost 20 years ago. I studied arts. I also studied architecture. So I have a double titulation, which for me is very important in my dynamics of working on the cities, on the street. I mean, when you talk about urban or street art, you imply that our work is done in the city. I mean, of course, sometimes I go out and paint in the rural spaces, which is very convenient because it could be less delictive and police could be easier on you. But of course, our practice has to do with the city. So I was born in Bogotá, and I have lived all my life here in Bogotá, capital city of Colombia, South America. And even though I've had the opportunity to travel and to get to know other cultures, even to paint in other cities, I always come back. I think that Bogotá is a perfect playground for me in terms of my work, and I love it, even though it's a big city with of course a lot of problems. I'm gonna start with a presentation that makes like an introduction on why is Bogotá considered one of the main cities in the world to take a look at graffiti art. Some of you will be saying, what are you talking about? Okay, I thought it was Barcelona, I thought it was New York, but I'm going to share the presentation now. And afterwards, I wish I can take probably 15 minutes to do this presentation as an introduction, and also as a possibility of talking about the city, the anthropology of the city of Bogotá, my city, and not only about my work. After this presentation, I'm gonna do a presentation of my work, but making emphasis on the latest works that has to do with political issues that has been going on in specifically in Colombia, but also in all the world, that has to do with the pandemics and also the differences that the pandemics has shown, and the repression and the extreme thoughts and the political uncertainties. And okay, we'll talk about that later. But going back to the fact that Bogota is considered the seventh city in the world to take a look at graffiti, who says that a magazine that it's called Bombing Science, that it's a magazine that is pretty well known and renowned in terms of street art and graffiti. So I came out with this information, and I was wondering, why is it that Bogota, and of course I am confirming it because I have the opportunity to go to other places, and I can confirm you that Bogota is probably one of the cities with most types and quantity of graffiti, street art, stencil, blocks, abstract art, sticker art, face tabs. It's just amazing. It's very diverse and it's huge. Since you get down of the airplane, you're gonna start like getting a lot of information through what you can find on the walls. Of course, that changes between each city. So I started wondering why that could be. So I ended up with four facts that I think, or four situations that I think that are making it possible that Bogota is in that place of the ranking. So we're gonna make a little bit of analyze a little bit these four aspects. First of all, the green one, it says the physical characteristics of the city. That's the buildings, the roads, the hard, the material city, the physical city. Second, the legal aspects that we have here in Bogota, that I'm going to explain it also in terms of street art, but not only in terms of street art, but also in general terms, because we are a third world country and sometimes law can't take care of everything. The state can't take care of everything. Sorry. Third is the social and political issues, social and political conditions that makes it an ideal place for the practice of street art. And fourth is the cultural diversity that Bogota has. So first of all, the first characteristics is like the physical characteristic. In Bogota, we have a public system transport. We don't have a metro or a subway system, unfortunately. And it's of course a very, it's a city full of traffic, very heavy traffic. And this is like our public system that consists of buses that has their own lane. This system was introduced in year 2000, so it's 20 years old now. And even though at one time probably it was good, of course now it has a lot of problems. One of the things that happened when they introduced this system is that they started passing the system through a lot of places, chopping down the buildings beside, chopping the buildings down or tearing them down, and letting a lot of on work or unfinished facades. I mean, the buildings were like, they took care of opening the lane, of course, but they didn't took care of the buildings beside. Even though many people was like replaced, they were relocated, and then they just tear down the building, but they left like the wall. They didn't took care of the wall, so that was like a physical space that was perfect for the practice of street art, because it was like a no space. It was a space of nobody. I mean, the people that was living inside these homes, they say, okay, I don't even look at that wall. I don't care. They probably take care of the facade, but this is like the side of their houses. So nobody took care of these spaces. And when graffiti and street art started like taking a lot of power and started appearing a lot here in Bogota, that was probably since year 2000 to 2010, it was by the hand of these spaces. In some occasions, they try to take care of them, probably doing this texture in brick, probably doing these hanging gardens. But of course, we know that graffiti can take a good care of all of these surfaces. Of course, the graffiti also went over the brick, and of course, the hanging gardens in most of occasions ended up being dead gardens, and they were just dismantled because nobody took care of them. And of course, even though it's an open space, it needed some caring. So here you can see that this is all around the city because we have many lanes of the Transmilenio system, and all of the lanes of the Transmilenio system has the same treatment of the facades or the no spaces that I'm talking about. You can see it here. In some of them, the state or the city has been doing like promoting some projects in order to paint these walls, doing projects and giving the money, giving some funds to the artists, in order to take care of these surfaces. We took care of one of these walls in year 2013 with funds of the city. And that is a practice that nowadays is pretty common, that the city promotes a lot the street art and graffiti practices, and they can finance a lot of surfaces. Could be like big surfaces on the side of a high building, or it could be also these surfaces that are the remains of what I'm telling you about the Transmilenio system. So this I did it with my collective or my crew that is called Bogotá Street Art. Crystal was telling you about that. We have worked in some publications. We've came out with 3 books now, which talk about the street art, the stencil, and even a sticker movement here in Bogota. Another fact here in Bogota is that there is a lot of abandoned houses, and this for an architect could be pretty hard to see. I am an architect, and at the beginning I couldn't understand this very much. I mean, beautiful houses, beautiful structure from the 1930s, from the 1950s, and they are ruined. What happens here is that many of these houses are very difficult to take care nowadays, because they need a lot of money to repair and to maintain. So even though the city has some plans on these houses, that is to leave the public services cheaper to these houses in order for the owners to take care of them. Even though with those helps of the state, it's very difficult for a regular family to take care of these houses. So if these houses aren't taken, for example, by a financial enterprise or a commercial space, it's difficult that they can be maintained. So they prefer it to let it ruin and sell the lot for a building, a taller building to be constructed in that site. There is also another situation, and is that many of these homes also were bought in some stage by money of the narco traffic. It's not a secret for all of us that Colombia has an economy that has been based on narco traffic, and many of these structures probably at some point were bought by illegal money, and of course the state they take them away from the people if they know that they have been brought with illegal money. So at the end, they are spaces that are abandoned because it's difficult. Nobody owns them. The paperwork is uncertain. So these are also perfect spaces for graffiti, for paste up, for stencil. Gentrification is also a fact that has left these structures in this state of abandon. Because of course there are some parts of the city like this avenue that is called Avenida Caracas, that it's a very central avenue, but it was probably in the 60s a very nice avenue in Bogota, but nowadays it isn't. Or not only because the Transmilenio system, but it's not very safe. It's full of graffiti, which of course people don't like that much. So people are leaving this area and going to another areas. So these areas are being abandoned because of gentrification, and the buildings, of course, are perfect for the practice of street art. There is even street artists, and probably you know that the more vandalic type, that they got into the building. They got into the building. They got in the fourth or the third floor or in the terrace, exposing their life and making it more illegal, very illegal, because they are, of course, entering some private property. A lot of abandoned houses and even buildings. Some of them get occupied by people that are homeless. There is also this system of box culvert or channels that recollect the water and take it out of the city into the rivers, and there are all around the city. Of course, at the beginning, it wasn't very interesting painting in these spaces because all of the city was able for you to paint. I mean, 10 years ago. But since the city has been getting more and more painted and space is more difficult to find in order to express yourself, these spaces start becoming available. There are also some of these spaces that are pretty, they can be seen from the bus, and there are some places where you get a traffic jam and the bus can stop and take a good look at the paintings that you do at these channels. So it's also a space that can be used, and there is, of course, very legal. I mean, no police will tell you nothing, because nobody cares about those spaces. I mean, here in Bogota, like, it's very difficult for the city to take care of the structure of the city, and of course, people in terms of materialistic and capitalistic thought, they think about themselves and their possessions. They don't give a shit about everything else. They are just taking care of their car, their furniture, their stuff. Okay, the second is the legal aspects. Here we at the beginning, before 2013, there was no law taking care about graffiti. That wasn't established, so it was like a double blade, because probably you can do it, and since there wasn't a law, you could get away with it, but also sometimes police get you, police caught you, and since there wasn't a law, they started inventing the law, so they do whatever they want. So they just sometimes just beat you, they took you to jail, they sometimes took the paints and paint all over your face, your belongings, or your clothing. So there was a lot of police abuse coming along with the non-regulation of the practice. And also for the normal society, it has been a process of understanding the practice. At the beginning, people didn't understand. Probably you know that when you aren't used to something, probably you don't even see it. So at the beginning, it happened like people was like, "What the hell? I don't know what's that." I don't even understand. So they didn't even see you. But then again, probably some of the people, since it wasn't regulated, start like doing what they thought it was correct, or taking the law by their hands. It happened to me that one time a guy from a house came out with a knife because I was painting on his neighborhood. There wasn't a law, I mean, so it was difficult. On 2013, the law came out. The mayor at that time said, okay, there is a lot of people painting, a lot of people involved in this practice. And the fact that probably we don't understand it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And that probably it's time for us to take care of this, because there is a lot of people doing that. It's something that we can't close our eyes and ignore anymore. So they start doing some studies, and they came out with a law in terms of graffiti, telling what was the correct thing, what wasn't, what happened if you get caught doing graffiti, all of that. They started doing it in 2013. That was very important because it ended up with the police abuse. It also made the practice, the graffiti and the street practice closer. It bring the practice closer to the people, because now it was on a paper and the city understand what it was. At that time, it also started happening, and probably the people that are connected, that have some idea of street art, know that this has happened probably 10 years ago in all of the world. That is that a practice that was very illegal and very dark and very poorly known, it became a fancy, bug and a good thing, because it started going on the magazines, on the news. People wants to decorate their fancy bar with graffiti. So, and that happened all the time, you know. That's why it's so stupid at the beginning, or judging something by the aesthetics. I mean, how can you judge something by the aesthetics? I mean, probably I don't like that, but probably somebody else like it. I mean, that's the important and the good thing about art, or let's not call it art, graphic, image. You like it and I don't like it, okay, that's okay, but the wall is over there still. The wall hasn't been ruined. The wall is still closing. The wall is still supporting the bridge. It just has been painted. And if I like it or if I don't like it, it's just subjective. And I don't have to like classical art. And this has been happening through all the history of art. Probably in the 1910s, people started hating pictorialism, and they started hating because they started being very into cubism and into structuralism. So they started hating representation, and that's good. So I don't understand why people sometimes get into aesthetic judgment. Oh no, this is good, this is bad. Damn, it's just a painting. Just don't say it's good, it's bad. Say I like it or I don't like it that much. But good or bad is not something that you can judge in art or in painting or in image. So it also happened in 2011, something very dramatic. That was that a guy, a kid, he was 18, got killed by a police because he was painting a graffiti. Police came, he ran, everything got out of control, and the police killed this guy by the back, which was terrible. But it wasn't that terrible as what happened after, that it was that police was telling the media and bribing people in order to say that the guy was robbing a bus, and that's why he had been killed. The police didn't say that he was doing graffiti and the other guy just got carried away and killed him. The police was trying to say that he was armed, he was robbing a bus, and that's why he got killed. Something that hopefully, because of the work of his father and a lot of organizations, nowadays, everybody knows the truth that he was killed by the police. Nowadays, the police is in the jail, and many of the people that was involved in the police at that day, at that moment, that was in 2011, that was involved at that moment and that tried to cover the crime, it's in jail right now. So that killing also put the graffiti practice on the table. So it wasn't possible to keep ignoring it. A guy has been killed. This news came out in all the media, so everybody knew about what happened. So this make also this makes like some of the it was also an important issue in order to make out or to issue the law of graffiti, which of course we are not going to enter into legal issues, but it's important to have the law. Sometimes the law here, as I was telling you, in Colombia or in Bogotá, the law sometimes is only on paper, because it's difficult to that the police or the state can like impose that law in a civilized way. So most of the time the law is in paper, and it's difficult to materialize it on the real life. They started, which is pretty interesting. They started with some plans of giving some importance to the like the different like different areas of Bogotá. Bogotá is divided in different areas or localidades, and they started like giving like every area or every localidad like the possibility of making or forming a graffiti group, a graffiti desk, in order to discuss the issues that has to do with the practice in that area. Also, all of the projects in terms of renovation that has to do with that localidad or area, most of the time started working with the graffiti desk or the graffiti group. So it was pretty interesting, because it was in some way empowering the people that was doing the practice in order for them to make decisions. And that was also intended into making the practice a little bit less vandalic. We all know that graffiti has to do with sometimes with breaking the rules and being vandalic. So trying to tame or to domesticate the wild is sometimes difficult. But of course the city tried to do it, and they tried to do it in a pretty nice way, because they tried to establish these desks, these workshops, and they just tried to say, okay, let's try to do paintings on the street, but let's try to do it in the way that people or the city like it. That's in an organized way. Even though you do graffiti, let's try to do it in a legal way or in a formal channel. Let's try to avoid the city structures like benches, like traffic lights, like signs. Let's paint on unauthorized walls. So then again, of course, it's difficult to make it real, but it's good that the city has the intention. After this major in 2013 did that, it came another major, really right-wing major, that started buffing all the graffiti art and painting it black, white and gray. This was an issue that pissed off a lot of people, not only graffiti artists, but community. Because of course, here in Colombia, in Bogotá specifically, I can say that 90% at least of the people understand, likes and see the important cultural, artistic importance of street art. Anthropological, in terms of empowerment, in terms of saving lives from violence. I mean, they know. So a lot of people got like mad with this mayor. A lot of people started, like the media also started like pointing this out. I mean, it's like, what is the need of doing this? But of course, graffiti is like a bad weed. It started spring again pretty fast. So at the 2 or 3 days of the painting of the grave by the mayor, of course, a lot of street artists, graffiti artists started retaking the space. This space that you see here and here is a very important space. It's a big highway that takes from the airport to the downtown of the city. Very important highway because it's like the entrance to the city, and it's full of graffiti. It's totally packed, and you can see that when when there is more tolerance into the interventions that are done here, the interventions are pretty better done. So nowadays, what you are seeing here is pretty old, and it is nothing like is done nowadays. Nowadays is like high quality letters, huge letters, probably 1/4 mile message, well done by a collective of 30 artists with a message, very protest message. It's a very important highway, or a very important street for graffiti. It's called Avenida del Dorado. It's also very significant because probably you know the El Dorado legend here in Colombia that has to do with the indigenous that buried gold and treasures on a lake, but it was never found. So there is still people like looking for that treasure for El Dorado. Some institutional events started happening since I'm telling you that the city started like promoting and in some kind of way understanding and promoting the practice. So this is a cultural area that is called Distrito Graffiti District. It's an industrial zone, as you can see, like warehouses, but the city has paid and artists from all around the world, because most of them are from abroad, to come here and paint these huge walls in that area. And they have started promoting this station of Transmilenio, that you can see the stair of Transmilenio, which is the system that I talk about. They are promoting the station as Distrito Graffiti Station, and trying to make like a cultural, touristic district on the site. But then again, as I state here, probably 80% or more of the graffiti that you see in the city is definitely informal or illegal. The third issue has to do with political and social conditions. Of course, all of you probably know that here in Colombia, we have a very delicate situation in terms of social conflict, struggle. It has been going on since the 50s. Political war, political disappearing, kidnapping, silencing people. So of course, all of that political struggle is also a reason for the street art to appear, because in our societies, when the institutional channels are taken by, in this case, probably the state or the big companies that are also like working with the state hand to hand. You know, they are the ones that here in Colombia, like the big companies, the banking system, the ones that own the beer, the soft colas, they put the president because they are the owners of the country. They are the people that, I mean, one of the 100 most rich people in the world, and they own the country. And they decide who is going to be the president because they put money into their campaigns and so on. I mean, it's not only here. It happens a lot. But So in that sense, when the traditional channels or traditional media that could be magazines or could be the news on TV are owned by these companies that are the ones that are working with the politician, and they are broadcasting what the politician wants to be broadcast, it's very difficult to get the other side of the story. And then again, here, the street, it's a very important space for making a protest through a street art that can be significant, that people can see, and that it's outside of this traditional media. So the street start becoming the voice of those that aren't on the traditional media, the voice of those that aren't in the power. For example, here we see a mural of, the UP. UP was Unión Patriótica, which was a political leftist group party here in Colombia in the 80s and the 90s. And they were killed. 3,600 of them were killed by the right politicians, by the right-hand politicians, which have governed this country since 50 years ago, 70 years, sorry. So that's the UP genocide. It was the left-hand party, and every of those candidates that tried to run for president, it got killed. As simple as that. Here you can see a mural for Voz, is like the newspaper of the FARC. FARC is the extinct guerrilla, that leftist Marxist guerrilla that was in a struggle with the government for 60 years, and that got into a peace agreement 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And they have a newspaper that is called Voz. So here you can see La Verdad del Pueblo, the truth of the people, and like the farmer, the Afro, like the diversity. Because of course, killing, making a genocide, and the government here that has been, as I'm telling you, the power has been very allied to the commercial and the companies and the financial system also. They have always tried to avoid the inclusion and the possibility of making a country of diversity. They have always prioritized the white people, the rich people, the Christian people. They have always avoided the black communities, which were here before we came, and it happened exactly the same in the US. I mean, I don't understand why people in the US are getting annoyed with migrations, even though the land that they are stepping on wasn't theirs. It's a rob, it's not a still land, and they are getting mad because people are arriving. I mean, it's being a hard face. So it's the same here. They are displacing the communities. They are displacing the farmers. They are taking the lands of the farmers in order to put cattle, in order to put big mono cropping, that most of the times all of the earnings go out of the country, and people here living on the basis. And people look at Venezuela, but they don't look that they don't realize that here we are on the same problems. The only difference is that here we don't have a socialist system that is like the worst thing that people can see, and oh no, it's socialist. But here we are a right-wing system, exactly the same, with the same problems, with the same displacement, with the same poorness, with the same differences of social classes. The rich people getting richer, and the poor people dying of hunger, looking on the bin, on the trash bin. And those situations of the poor people, of the people being displaced, of the farmer, of the of the police abuse is also a issue that of course is being treated on the walls. So here you say the peace is for the rich, the war is for the poor. A hero, no, it's not my hero, it's an assassin, it's a coward, talking about police that goes on the people, on the farmer, or on the people on the poor people, the people, yeah, the mass. On the marshes here, of course, there is a lot of, as there is a lot of problems, there is a lot of marches, a lot of people going out, a lot of strikes, a lot of movement, social movement, and of course, after every of this movement, the city is packed of these expressions. These expressions, as Crystal was saying, and it's the name of our third book, these expressions for me are escape valves to oppression, escape valves to anger. I mean, here we have people very having it very bad, a very bad time. And of course they are mad, and of course they are in a bad situation, and they want to express in some way. And sometimes this expression turns violent. And for some people, this type of writing could be violent. For me, it's just painting. And for me, it's better to be this type of violent than taking a rifle and killing 20 people, that you know what I am talking about pretty better than me here. The people from the soccer, the fanatics of the soccer, of course, they have their own writing, their own crew, their own codes, their own colors, and it's very important because they also find the space on the city walls in order to reaffirm their culture, that in this sense is totally linked to the football team of their heart. That we have two teams, one is Millonarios, one is Santa Fe, and of course it's also very interesting that sometimes they get into a graphic struggle in between of them, in between the two teams, or the people, the followers of the teams. And for me, it's very interesting because, as I'm telling you, it's beautiful that they are fighting on the wall. And for me, fighting with painting is beautiful instead of stabbing the other guy. That also happens a lot. They got carried away because of football or a soccer game, and they stab the guys of the other team. For me, it's of course a lot better to make it a paint war, a paint struggle. The politicians, even politicians that at one point were like prohibiting the street art, they also use the street as a way of promoting their political campaigns. So that's also one of the big contradictions of politics, and the possibility of uses of the public space, that we know that the wall is like the paper of the madman. I mean, everybody could do whatever they want on the walls. Nobody's space. To finish with a reflection, with a thought that it has always like came to my mind, is that many people regret and hate street art, even if it's graffiti, even if it's muralism, even if it's probably tagging or just political messages like this, political graffiti. But they don't realize that they are being bombarded by a lot of advertisement. Our cities are nowadays full of advertisement, and people are happy with consuming. People are happy with advertisement, with letters that has to do with the capitalist system, but not with letters that they can't understand, which are a little bit of aggressive for them, like graffiti artists. And the last point is like the cultural diversity of Bogotá. Here in Bogotá, we have people that come from all of the country, because it's the capital, because even though we are a city with a lot of problems and differences, we are like the city that has the most possibilities of work here in Colombia. So there is a lot of people from the rural areas of Colombia, where in which there is a lot of conflict. I mean, warring between the state and guerrillas or paramilitary groups. So they are displaced, or they just get away of their territory, and they start going into the city. And of course, the city that takes the most people that are displaced is Bogotá. Not only in a bad way, also a lot of people from the mid cities come here to study, for example, because we here in Bogotá have the best universities of the country. So there is also a lot of people. Anyways, there is here in Bogotá a condition that makes it very, very diverse. That is that migration that is constantly coming. Nowadays, also from Venezuela, we are receiving a lot of people from Venezuela, and that also has triggered a very cultural diversity that is very interesting, and that for me is very, very interesting, and I'm glad that it's happening. The cultural, as I was telling you, the people that come from Venezuela, the Afro culture here in Colombia is it's strong. Here in the Pacific area, we have a very Afro community, very they have very deep traditions, very interesting cultural array. And of course, many of them come here to Bogotá also. It's the capital. People that migrate from Venezuela. Indigenous people that, as I was telling you, they are like the first owners of our land. This is the Kogi people from the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta in the north of the country. Rap, hip hop community, rap community, breakdance community, probably punk community. So all of these communities are also communities that are making Bogotá a city full of different cultural proposals that not only has to do with street art, but with music, with dancing, with, for example, parkour, skate. So it's different possibilities of using a city also, and trying to make a city, Bogotá, a city of everybody. Because as many people come here, some of the attitude that they take is like, this is not my city, I am from a middle city, so I don't take care of this city. But what I think that we have to do is like turn around the problem and say, this is the city of all of us, even the ones that come here for a year, even if they think different, the LGBT community, different possibilities of thinking, poor people and rich people, people that uses the street as a possibility of making a parkour or BMX or skate on the city. That's also using the infrastructure of the city. The ciclo ruta, that is something that happens here in Bogotá every weekend. That is that they close the main streets in order for the people to take the street on bike, on a skate, whatever, a rollerblade. There is a lot of people that do aerobics on the parks. So that's also another possibility of using the city. Very interesting. So, okay, this is like it was supposed to be short. It didn't came that short, but I hope you like it. It's welcome to my city. Welcome to Bogotá, the city of all. As I'm telling you, it's not perfect, but it's very, very interesting. Okay. Now I'm gonna share the other presentation. I'm gonna get a glass of water also. Wait a second.
Thank you. In the meantime, maybe if anybody has questions about that first presentation before we see the presentation of DJLU's work, maybe we can take like one question now while you.
Sure, perfect.
Okay, and I think I set this up so that I have to, okay, you can unmute yourself now, or you could also put a question in the chat if you have a question in the chat. But we'll have time after this other presentation too.
Okay, but you wanna, is there any questions right now?
I don't see any. You know, when we started our class, one of the first things that we read about was when Antanas Mokus was the mayor.
Yeah.
And how he used different techniques, including artists and mimes and different ways to kind of like better the city and manage the city as the mayor. What was his position on graffiti and street art?
Okay, at that point, there wasn't that much street art or graffiti. I mean, there was none. The only street art, no, it wasn't street art. It was graffiti, and it was the lyrical or poetical graffiti or political that I was talking about. That it's just a phrase in a very simple letter, in a very simple script that has to do with some situation of political relevance at the moment. Sometimes it uses a little bit of a poetical language in order to make it like interesting, to have that click on people's mind, like the play a word play, a play in words probably. So we couldn't talk about graffiti art or street art at that point. Of course, that I believe for Antanas Mokus, it wasn't an issue because, as I'm telling you, you take a look at the streets and they were clean streets, totally clean streets. But I want to talk about something that it's published on the book of escape valves that we were talking about. That it's a book on stencil in Bogotá since the last 20 years, and on the first chapter, that it's the chapter of time, that it contains the oldest stencils, the first stencils that started appearing on the city. In that chapter, we reserved a page for a guy that it's a French guy, stencil artist, that it's called Nemo, and he came to Bogotá at that point when Antanas Mokus was the mayor. We're talking about 2003, I believe, something like that, 2003, yeah. He came to do some stencils here in Bogotá, which were very institutional. I remember that they were in some kind of way promoted, or at least the paint was paid by some car company, so it has the logotype of the car company. And since we published this guy on the book, we looked for some phrases of him on the internet, and we found of his experience here in Bogotá, and we found some interesting quotes. He stated that he came at that point to do that project, and that he received like a free pass for doing graffiti by the mayor of the moment, which was Antanas Mokus. So that's interesting because, of course, afterwards the graffiti became a very illegal practice, and many of us have been jailed because of doing this. And Nemo got a free pass for graffiti by Antanas Mokus at that point. So that's like a interesting story. Yeah.
That is interesting. We can go ahead with the other presentation, and then we'll see what questions we have after.
Okay. So are you looking at the presentation? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not in presentation mode.
Yeah. I will.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So As I was telling you, I studied arts and I studied architecture. I call myself DJLU because I used to be a DJ, an electronic music DJ when I was studying architecture. Then when because I started architecture first. Then when I started doing arts, I started doing more emphasis on art. And that's why when I started painting on the streets, but I kept my name of DJ Lu because I thought it was more like a symbol more than a name. And also because I thought that the project that I started with on the streets, I mean, in a serious way of doing a street art, was a project that it's the pictogram project, in which I thought that there was a lot of mixing involved. But at this point, I wasn't mixing songs or vinyls, or but I was mixing images. So I decided to keep the name and make it a symbol. As you can see here on the side of these pictograms, there is a symbol that is DJLU. So I wanted it more to be a symbol that accompanied that was beside the images more than a name. This is the first project that I started working on the streets when I was studying arts on the public university, Universidad Nacional. Before this, of course, I've been doing things on the street, but it was more like tagging, like writing things, like doing some stencil with some symbols, but I didn't have like a project, a solid project in mind. In the year 2004, approximately, when I was studying arts, I came out with this project that was based on semiotics and on sign language. As a urban human used to the city, I am very fond to the signs that control us as society. The traffic lights, the sign, stop sign, speed sign, parking sign, whatever. I love signs, and the pictograms that accompany that goes with the sign, because it's like a simplification, a total simplification of the image, and I started like looking at that possibility. By the way, I started looking at this possibility because I also encountered it very difficult to draw in a freehand, in a traditional way. So I also understood that nowadays art doesn't have to do with being virtuous in drawing. It's also one way of doing art, and it's incredible, and I appreciate and I respect a lot people that are virtuous and can draw freehand a human drawing in a perfect proportion. But of course, I noticed that I wasn't that type of guy. So I say, okay, I'm not good at painting, traditional painting, not even sculpting, probably at photography. That's why I ended up doing a postgraduate course on photography. But I was very interested in the idea behind the image, not just the image. And of course, I wasn't interested in trying to fight and having a bad time trying to get an image only because it's virtuous. Nowadays, we can photograph something, or we can recycle, or we can appropriate something and give it a different meaning. So I started getting into this project that I call it Pictograms, Science for a Better World. It was a possibility of doing an image that has to do with colliding two images that probably weren't related before the collision, like the rifle and the martini, like the pineapple and the grenade, that the Christ at the rifle and the cross, the tits and the ice cream, the broken windows. And in that collision that has to do with mixing, with recycling, with homaging, and also has to do with DJing, but DJing with the image, appropriating image, because you can see this is a symbol that, of course, I didn't have to draw it. I just go to the internet or whatever. I have a lot of books that has to do with pictograms, with sign, so I can just take a photograph of that and vectorize it. Because, but what I believe, not only as an artist but as a teacher, is that you have to be aware of what are your strong points, your positive points, and what are your debilities, the parts in which you aren't that good. And as soon as you get to know that and realize it, probably you can start making emphasis on what you are kind of good. And I noticed that I probably was kind of good on proposing an idea, communicating an idea, more than drawing or painting or representing. No. I was probably better in presenting an idea, not representing something. And I did it, taking some images, making them very simple, avoiding the unnecessary detail. That in order to make the message to be very clear and to get the message straight to the receptor in seconds, like a street sign does. So that's why I decided avoiding color, avoiding details, in most of cases, avoiding text. Text has to do with language. And I started talking this symbol or semiotic language that can be interpreted all around the world. Of course, there is different views. Probably, if you put it in cultural issues, some culture think different about some images. That's also interesting. But there are symbols that send out a message, definitely. Send out a message in a very direct way. And they do it colliding through a very simple image, avoiding detail, and they talk about a lot of problems that I believe that we have here in my city, in my country, in my continent, in our continent, and in our world. This is not something that is going on here in Colombia. I mean, issues like the dependence on fossil fuel and the fact that we are destroying our planet because the use of carbon and fossil fuels. The fact that we here in Colombia are losing young people because they get trapped in landmines that has been planted there by the war, by the actors of the war that we have been living since 60 years ago. The fact that there is people with hunger. There is a lot of inequality, not only in Colombia, in this world. Probably some thinking about religion, the power and the institutions that represent religion on earth, and probably those sex scandals that they have been involved in. The fact that the war is a business, and we know that war is a business. And here in Colombia, we know it because here in Colombia, war moves economy. So I call this pictogram the economy of war. Complicity. The war box series that is like these insects with weapons, for me, it talks about the diseases that has to do with the tropical that are affecting a lot our people, not only soldiers, but guerrilla, but people that is involved in the country, because they get malaria, they get leishmaniasis, and those are diseases that are totally directly related with the conflict here in Colombia. It's so bad, the situation. I'm gonna tell you this anecdote that is pretty terrible. At one point during the direct war struggle in between the guerrillas and the state, in some hospitals, they didn't take care of the people that came with leishmaniasis. because they implied that they were guerrilla, from the guerrilla. Because of course, most of the people that got it was people that was fighting on the tropic rural areas and got bitten by the mosquito and got leishmaniasis or malaria. Inequality. Media as a possibility of control. War in our ADN, in our genes. We have war, and we are a terrible sanguinary race, or yeah, humanity is pretty terrible in that sense. Playboy also as a critic of pedophilic in the church. Also some that has to do with contamination. So we have the bomb, the planet bomb. We have the factory that expels like the map of the country in smog. Overpopulation. In the game of war, nobody wins. It's like a tic-tac-toe game. It's always closed. Everybody loses. Even the winner loses on a war. That's something that I don't think why don't we understand that? Money as our only as our only possibility today, as our only God, as our only has to do with this talks about relationships, about contamination. This is a hybrid in between some rifles and scissors, and it has to do with the war as something that breaks, that tears apart not only the skin, but houses, towns, societies, families. Also, they depend on oil, on fusing foil, on gasoline. The fact of global warming, says Inferno. Also, media as a promoter of war or of inequality. In the game of war, nobody wins. Corruption. A lot of reflections. Probably these are thoughts, these are critics, these are a lot of ideas that got into my mind and that are represented in this formula that is like the pictogram formula. Probably some of them are easier to understand, the message is clearer, some of them probably are more cliche, some of them probably are more smart, some of them are more typical, but nowadays I have more than 150 pictograms designed. So this is a project very important for me because it's a project that it's a long-term project. I've been doing it since year 2004. It's been 15 years now. These are the latest ones. Has to do with 2 years ago, the COVID situation, the pandemics, and what came out of the pandemic situation. So the world all over under the same threat that most of the time we think as societies that are different to others, or races that are different to others, and we are better and we have more money and we are more powerful. But the fact is that this virus put us all in the same situation of vulnerability. So the world was like a virus. All of us are the same. All of us can be dead tomorrow. So let's start being better. The medical people, the people that work on the medical system, they started having it pretty bad because they weren't working with good conditions. They didn't understand the virus very well. And here in Colombia, we have a very difficult, the medical system is good, but the economics that goes behind the system is pretty shitty because it's owned by privates. And of course, if you don't have money, probably you will get a worse service than if you have money. And in that sense, many of the medicals that were working, of the medic people, weren't getting paid, and they were working with terrible biological security. After the pandemic came, of course, it was difficult to keep people on their homes, but it was a necessity because of the virus. But here in Colombia, as a very inequality and a very poor country, it's very difficult to tell people that lives on the daily because they sell some candies on the street and cigarettes on the street. You can tell them, okay, just be at home 20 days, because they live on what they receive every day. So it was difficult to quarantine people. And this quarantine, of course, started showing a lot of difference and a lot of hard time and a lot of poverty. And it showed the fragility of the system at the end. At the end, it was that. It showed the fragility of the capitalistic system. Poorest people were just getting the worst time of their life. Richer people, the owners of Amazon, the owners of Mercado Libre, the owners of the deliveries, they were making more money. So they were putting the gap bigger. Yeah, it's going to be a greater gap between the rich and the poor. The banking system, they show how angry they are, and they show how inhuman they are, because of course they didn't took the loans into a lower rate. They didn't think about people. They keep charging the same. They didn't give a chance to the people that was having a bad time. Of course not. The only one that can't wait a little bit is the bank. They can't. So the bank show how they are, and that's why I draw a bank robbing us. I mean, the bank is robbing us. I am not robbing the bank. The bank is robbing us constantly, and we are happy with that. The tax rates are going up. What I was telling you, the capitalist system as a promoter of viruses, because capitalist system promote the destruction of the nature. They promote the destruction of the environmental areas that are the ones that are intended to contain those viruses in nature, not to jump to humans. Here is one that has to do with the United States, and it has to do with that issue that happened last year when everybody entered the Capitol, and there was a big struggle around the White House, and Mr. Trump was charged because he was inciting people to do a riot and to burn the Capitol or whatever. So it showed, and it also was probably a leftover of the pandemics and of the police abuse that has been taking on in the US, and the racist system that you guys are used to have since the US started. Okay, probably they say that slavery and the racist system ended up 50 years ago, but I see a lot of racist issues still over there, as in here. I just told you guys that here is the same. Black communities here are always living on the poorest neighborhood, are getting the worst education, are getting the worst sanitary system. And that's not fair, because there is no races. We are all one humanity. Police abuse, Ku Klux Klan, white supremacy, police abuse, people having a bad time, the force of the people, the force of all the people together, the big mass of people. You know that normally when people get united, they can get over the tyrannic system, the government. And here in Colombia, during the protests that we had during the last 6 months, since April, it showed that if people unite, they can make themselves heard. They can make a great voice. So I did this pictogram that has to do with a microphone and the fist. I also talk about migration and how migration is a right. This is the process that I used to make a stencil. I had it in digital at one point. I pass it into a paper, a cardboard, sometimes using carbon paper, or you can project it. I left only the lines, and I take care of the bridges or the structure, because of course if I take all the circle is gonna fall apart. So I have to think about the bridges, and that's something that is probably the most important thing in a stencil, to manage the bridges, the structure, without losing the image, the idea, the aesthetics. Afterwards, I cut it with a hand sharp blade. I cut it by hand with a sharp blade knife. And then afterwards, I just go into the city and start putting it all around the city. Because I also consider very important the stencil technique, because it possibilities a lot of impacts. And that makes it a communication that it's a wider communication. If I go and put one, okay, it's okay. But if I go and put 50, of course, it's gonna communicate in a wider way. These were all done during the pandemics. It was interesting to get to know the city in that situation, because we were quarantined. It was very interesting to interact with the city in those situations. It was illegal, but of course I'm used to do illegal stuff in that sense. So I was, because at that point you weren't able to go to be outside, even if you, unless you have a good reason. So all of these pictograms came since during the last 2 years, that a lot of issues came out of that situation that we lived with the pandemics, or that we are living. It's better to say that, because this hasn't ended. This is a project, this is a project, yes, it's a series that I did during the pandemics, in which some politicians were depicted with a mask on their eyes. It was a critic to the decisions that they were taking. Most of the time, these politicians, this is Presidente Duque, our president in Colombia. Most of the times, these people, of course, they didn't know that well what was going on. And that happened all around the world, because of course it was a new situation, a new virus, and people weren't used to it. So many politicians were just improvising. And a lot of them also prioritized economic issues over health issues. So here you can see contagia is like a spread, consume spread, and President Duque with that mask on his eyes, representing the bad decisions that were taken in terms of the pandemics. Of course, President Trump was also one of the presidents that took very bad decisions in terms of the pandemic, and President Bolsonaro is not an exception. That's why Brazil, Estados Unidos, USA, and Colombia are one of the 3 countries that are in the list of the probably 6 countries in the world that has had the more cases of coronavirus. This is a project that's a virtual or a digital project. That's a digital art biennale that a friend of mine that lives in Guayaquil in Ecuador invited us to participate on. And she took pictures of different walls in Guayaquil, and also making the most out of the situation of confinement that we had at that point. She invented this digital virtual biennale, and it was very interesting because, of course, at that point we were all quarantined, and we had the possibility to interact with a wall and to propose something that, of course, it didn't materialize with painting, but it did on the digital world. So I did President Moreno, President of Ecuador, former President of Ecuador, which was also taking pretty bad decisions in terms of the pandemic. These are 2 lawyers, very well-known lawyers here in Colombia, that are used to defending people that are involved in very terrible cases of massacres, of narco traffic. So these are like the lawyers of the mafia and the lawyers of the bad guys. And I'm not saying that the lawyers are bad, but they are defending these people, and they use sometimes some tactics that are not that ethically correct. For example, this guy in the left, that the statement says for the right to take a shit. It says for the right to take a shit, because all the time that he has a reunion with his client and the prosecutors, he said that his client had diarrhea. He said that his client has a stomachal problems. So that's why they started calling him the shitty lawyer. And that's why I put here for the right to take a shit. And here in the guy on the right is Abogado Cadena, that it's the lawyer of our former president, Álvaro Uribe, which is involved in massacres, extrajudicial killings, and a lot of terrible issues. He's a pretty genocide. So this guy is defending a genocide, and he is very corrupt. He was bribing some people that was giving their testimony. He was bribing him, and he got caught in a conversation trying to bribe these guys. And he used to call himself the abogangster from the gangster of the mafia, abogangster. But then again, when he got caught on a conversation saying that he was an abogangster, he changed and he said that he didn't say that, but that he said that he was an abohamster. So you can imagine the type of people that we are dealing with, and those are the lawyers. This is our former president, Álvaro Uribe. I already talked about his cases. He's involved in massacres. He's involved in extrajudicial killings. He was going to be re-elected for a third term, even though here in Colombia we didn't have the possibility of re-election. When he got into power, he changed their constitution and he was going to be re-elected. So this is to tell you guys that dictatorships is not only from the left. We are always looking at Venezuela. We are always looking at Cuba, because the United States don't like the socialist system. It's always judging them. But here in Colombia, we also have our dictatorship. And it's this guy. And he's a killer. He's a genocide. He has more than 200 investigations. But as he is the most powerful guy here in Colombia, all the investigations end up with killing the people that it's involved. Nothing more to say around. So he finally last year he got into an investigation that made him resign from the Congress, because he was a congressman. So he had to resign because he got an investigation. And so I did this, that is, I depict him with a microphone as he was a singer with a hat that a lot of vallenato singers use here in Colombia. And I put the phrase, we want to see you singing. We want to hear you singing. Oh, we want to hear what you have to say about all the crimes that were done during your government. It's incredible because there is like 15 people that work with him, ministers that are jailed, but he has not been jailed because he's untouchable. It has to
DJLU, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we have like 5 minutes left of our class time. I know some people have to go at 5 o'clock, but I just wanted to let you know I'm fine with staying and we're recording so I can share it after, but I just wanted to let you know.
5 minutes, great. Okay, this is also our president and our ex-president. I depict them based on an LP, on a vinyl, an LP design from a band, a death metal band from Miami that is called Massacre from the 90s. So I took the album covers and I just clashed them to do these images of these presidents and ex-president, because we're starting having these massacres again in Colombia. That's serial killings. I mean, is that 5 people got killed at the same time. All of this happens more in the rural area, but it's terrible. The false positive cases or the extrajudicial killings in which they were taking regular people and killing them and making it passing them as if they were from the guerrilla, because they were paying the military, the Colombian army was paying the military that got results on the war against the guerrilla. So they start killing people that weren't guerrilla only to get the results and get the money and to show results. And we have the prosecutors and something that is called the Special Jurisdiction for Peace has discovered more than 604,002 killings that weren't people that was involved in war. This is our war minister or defense minister that has been involved in abuses against the people that were struggling manifest, and people that were pacifically doing manifestations during the Colombian paro, which was taking place 6 months ago. He also was bombarding some guerrilla settlements, and there were some kids in the settlements. So he was like bombarding places where kids were residing. This has to do with the people that was hunger, because the red flag became a symbol for the people that was hunger during the pandemics. So they hang a red flag out of their window. This was people that was killed during the national struggle by the state, of course. People that was pacifically rioting. All of these were killed by police abuse. So for me, it's very important to show these police abuses on the street, since the streets, as I was telling you, is the only place that is not taken by these political powers that try to cover the truth because they are allied with the police. It's terrible that I've been doing these medallions that are homage for the people that got killed by police, and they have been censored by the police. So it's terrible that they didn't just kill them, these guys and girls. They are killing their memory. For me, it's very important street art because it's a possibility not just only to making a homage and memory to the guys that were killed, but also pointing out the institution that killed them. And to finish with these portraits that are portraits of social leaders that has also been systematically killed here in Colombia in the last 5 years. Doris Valenzuela, Temístocles Machado, José Jair Cortés, Yolanda Perea, Maritza Quiroz, all of them social leaders, killed by different reasons. Francia Marquez is a social environmental leader. She hasn't been killed. She's running for president. It's a pretty good option. Emilsen Manjoma, she got killed. Jose Jimer Cartagena, killed by the paramilitary. Collaborative projects that came out during the paro, during the struggle. We all came together and we became stronger, and we were able to make a huge message that was intended to be seen by drone and new media, and that was intended to stand up for our situation in Colombia through the social media abroad from our country, because at one point we weren't being here in Colombia. So this was a possibility of showing the problems that we have and what was going on here in Colombia abroad through huge pieces made in a collaborative way and through the use of drones and social media. And that's it. Yes, only just to finish, if you want to get a look at my work, my Instagram is Juega Siempre. Juega Siempre translate play forever. I love playing. I think that you should always play, even if you are an adult, you should play in a serious way. I believe that life is a way of playing, and work should be also interesting as a game. And if you want to take a look at my works, you can check Juega Siempre in Instagram or Twitter.
Thank you so much. If I can abuse the time for just a minute, I saw one of the pictures you quickly skipped over was of the Casa Gráfica. Do you mind bringing it up and just saying a couple words about what it was and what role it played during the national strike? Thanks.
You're looking at the presentation or not yet?
Yeah.
Okay. But now, okay. This is, okay, here I was talking about collaborative projects, which also started like coming because of the struggle, because of the battle, because we started noticing that the situation was in a very critical situation, and we started noticing that probably it was time to talk about the situation and not ourselves. We as an artist sometimes are very egocentric. We're talking about ourselves, doing our work, our graphic line. It's always about ourselves. So it was very interesting that during this situation, we left a little bit aside our ego, and we were like, no, let's work together. Let's do a big letter. The message will be the priority and not our style. In that sense, we came out with a project that it was very nice, very interesting, that is called the Casa Gráfica. Casa Gráfica is like the street vendor car, but for graphic. It's like a street vendor car for graphic. So we took and give a second life to this structure, to this car, that it was a car that it was used to deliver some drinks on a gallery. So it was just parked on the gallery. So we noticed that, and we said, okay, we have to do something with this car. And it was the moment of the struggle, and the gallery that I worked with, which was the owner of the car, it's very close to one of the most important places of the riots, of the protest. So it was like just like 4 blocks away. So I said, okay, why don't we call some artists? Let's get involved with some artists that are willing to donate their graphic pay stubs. We're talking about pay stubs. The format is pay stub. And let's go to those places of concentration of the people and start giving out the graphic, because it's graphic that has to do with the struggle, and also in a way of trying to distribute the ideas in a free form, in a free way. Because then again, as I was telling you, in the capitalist system, we are always getting used to giving something if we get paid. It's difficult to do something without getting paid. So we say, okay, let's do something different. Let's distribute this for free. So let's call the artists. They will give us the graphic for free. We go outside, we give it for free, or changing just changing or for free. Afterward, we start receiving because people wanted to donate. So we start receiving some donations, and all the money that we receive is then again donated to animal causes. So that's like the project of the Casa Gráfica, which is the project of everybody. Everybody can put pasting inside. Everybody can take some posters out of it. And the idea is to distribute ideas.
Thank you. Thanks for showing us that. There are a lot of thank yous in the chat, but does anybody have a question for DJLU before we call it a day?
Thank you, everybody. I'm glad that you appreciate it.
Yeah, I always learn so much from you when I get to hear you talk. Okay, well, if we have no pressing, a question. Okay, Jamie, you can open your mic if you want. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me fix that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. And I just really appreciated your point around playing to your strengths and expressing yourself in the way that makes most sense to you. And I'm just curious, was that easy for you, or did you struggle to find the way that you express yourself best I just was like curious about your journey to get to the stenciling and.
Okay. You got into an interesting point. I have always defend the idea that being an artist or making it as an artist, that is something that in some kind of way I can say of my work nowadays. I did it in some kind, of course, there is a lot of things to do. It's a process, but my work is very renowned here. Nowadays I can live from my work. So in some kind of way, I can say that I realized as an artist. But this is something that I accomplished only with a lot of struggle, with a lot of obsession, with a lot of energy put on it, with very, very, very small virtuosity, with very, very small, probably luck. Luck doesn't exist in art. Muse doesn't exist in art. Virtuosity, I lack that. But what I do have is that I am a very, very, very obsessive person. And since I have a mind, I said, I want to be an artist. And I have to struggle each second in order to do that. It hasn't been easy. Here in Colombia, we're a poor country. If it's not easy being an artist in the United States or in other places, here is pretty difficult. I mean, people here have money for the basic. It's not that they have money to buy a painting that they're gonna put on their house. It's difficult. It's a luxury. So it's not easy to live from that. But then again, at one point, I said, I want to be an artist, even though I can't live from this. So I had to look for another options. So I was a teacher in architecture. So, and at one point when I was a youngster, I was a delivery guy for my mom. I was delivering, so I worked for her and I was delivering something which was very important for me because I got to know the city. So nowadays, I am probably not virtuous or a genius in anything, but I have made up a very conscious proposal that it has been structured on the abilities also, on what I am not good at. And stencil has been an incredible possibility because it allowed me to avoid my mistakes, my impossibilities. And it allows me to find the language that I needed to express myself. And then again, for example, my intentions, what is behind my work, it didn't come from morning to night. Probably 10 years ago, I didn't wanted my work to, and I didn't thought my work will take the path that it took today. It's something that, of course, when I started with these pictograms 15 years ago, you can see that, of course, there was an interest on political issues. But nowadays, that interest has been taking form and has been getting profound. It's been getting the hardest foundings. Nowadays, I work with the big teams. Nowadays, it all makes sense. So I believe that the best path to getting a well done, to be an artist, to realize as an artist, is doing it step by step, day by day, understanding that nothing comes from the morning to the night, and that nothing is easy, and that you are not going to win the lottery, and that each project is just a brick in a great structure that at the end you want to build.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? I didn't, I don't know. I just want to add that I think that DJLU's artistic practice also includes a lot of community-based activities, and that he teaches stencil and he teaches other practical forms of expression when he gets to travel and when he's invited to exhibit his work and to paint. And I think that you work around a lot of people. And I think that's really, it's one of the things that I admire you for as an artist, and it's really cool. And I also want to say that he's the one that taught me how to make a stencil. And so when you saw his, the way that he makes stencils, that's the way I taught them how to make it in our stencil workshop, which is a lot of fun. I'll send you pictures actually.
Great, great.
Okay, well, I think that's all the time that we have for today, but thanks again so much for teaching us and for coming with such an engaging presentation. And I'll see you in a month.
Great, great. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, everybody, for the attention. I'm glad that you liked the presentation. And as I told you before, welcome everybody to Colombia, and welcome everybody to understand the environment of the cities through the street art and the writings that you can find on the walls.